Imagine standing in the lobby of the bank you have used for over a decade. You ask to withdraw some spending money, only for the manager to pull you into a back room, lock the door, and turn a computer monitor toward you. On the screen is crystal clear security footage of your own flesh and blood, your daughter forging your signature to steal your entire life savings. She thought my grief over losing my wife made me weak. She assumed that because I was a lonely, aging widower, I was not paying attention. But what my daughter did not know was that I spent over 3 decades as a forensic accountant. I knew exactly what she was planning, and I had spent weeks setting the perfect, inescapable trap. Welcome to True Story. Hit that subscribe button and drop your city in the comments below. We read every single one. Let's get into it. The teller's name was Brittany. I know that because I've been coming to that Texas Star Bank branch on Elm Street in Dallas for 11 years. And Brittany had been there for most of them. She was a young woman with dark hair and a specific professional warmth that made the ordinary business of banking feel human. She knew my name. She asked about my wife by name for a year after Eleanor died, which I appreciated in the quiet way you appreciate people who remember that grief doesn't expire on a schedule. On the morning of a Thursday in October, I walked through the glass doors of the bank at 10:15 in the morning, approached the window, and asked to withdraw $3,000 from my personal checking account. Brittany smiled. She asked for my ID. I handed it over. She typed. She looked at the screen. And then she went still. Not the ordinary stillness of processing a transaction, but the specific stillness of a person whose eyes have landed on a red flag. Their professional training is managing very carefully. She looked up at me, trying to keep her expression neutral, and failing. "Mr. Pendleton, could you give me just one moment?" "Please," she said. She picked up her phone, turned slightly away, and spoke in a hushed voice. When she hung up, she looked back at me. "Someone will be right with you if you could just wait one moment." I looked at her. "Brittany, what's wrong? I'm going to have Mr. Jenkins come out to speak with you. He's the branch manager." "Just one moment. Mr. Pendleton." She said my name twice in 30 seconds. That is what you do when you are trying to make a difficult situation feel safe. I had been a certified public accountant for 33 years. I had sat across from clients delivering terrible financial news more times than I could count. I knew what it looked like when a person was managing you toward a severe conversation. 30 seconds later, a man in his 40s with close-cropped gray at his temples and a blue blazer walked toward me. He extended his hand. "Mr. Pendleton, I'm Robert Jenkins, branch manager. Would you mind stepping into my office for a moment?" "Of course," I said. I followed him into a corner office with a window looking out onto Elm Street. He closed the door, sat behind his desk, and deliberately turned one of his monitors toward me. "Mr. Pendleton, I want to show you something before we discuss what I'm about to tell you," Robert said. "At 8:47 this morning, a person entered this branch and made a cash withdrawal from your personal checking account. The withdrawal was for the full available balance, $22,460. He let that sit for a moment. The withdrawal was accompanied by a signed authorization slip bearing what appeared to be your signature per our fraud protocols. I reviewed the transaction after our system flagged an anomaly, and I want you to see what the security camera recorded at 8:47. He clicked the mouse. The monitor showed a security camera feed from above the teller windows, time-stamped 8:47 and 23 seconds. The image was perfectly clear. The person at the teller window was a tall, well-dressed woman with dark hair, pulled back, wearing a gray coat. I recognized her immediately. She was my daughter. I looked at that image for a long time. Robert Jenkins graciously said nothing, allowing me the silence the moment required. Very quietly, I said, "That is my daughter, Margaret Pendleton Hayes." "Yes, sir," he said. "That is what we believed as well. Given the account name, She is not authorized to make withdrawals from this account. No. Sir, the account is in your name only. The authorization slip appears to bear a forged signature. We have suspended the transaction pending our internal fraud review, which means the funds have not yet cleared. They are currently frozen. Frozen. I sat with that word. I sat with everything it implied. And everything I had understood to be happening over the past several weeks that had been building toward exactly this confirmation. Robert, I appreciate how you've handled this. I said, is the money still in the account? The cash was dispersed? Mr. Pendleton. But our fraud hold means it cannot be further transferred or deposited by the recipient. The total amount is effectively frozen pending resolution of the investigation. If you file a police report today, which I strongly recommend, we can begin the formal recovery process. I'm going to need a complete copy of the transaction record, the authorization slip, and a still image from this security footage. We can have all of that prepared for you within the hour. I sat back in the chair, looking at the frozen image of my daughter in her gray coat at 8:47 in the morning. But here is what she did not know. Here is the twist that changes everything. What my daughter, Maggie, I did not know when she walked into that Texas Star Bank was that 3 weeks earlier, I had moved every dollar of my actual life savings to a completely different institution. The $22,460 was not my primary wealth. It was the specific amount I had deliberately left behind in the account she had access to. It was the amount I decided I could afford for her to try to steal, because I had known for 3 weeks that she was going to make her move. And I spent those 3 weeks setting the trap. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I am 67 years old. I live in Dallas, Texas. And the education that brought me to that chair cost me $22,000 in frozen funds and 33 years of professional discipline. My daughter made a mistake that every person who tries to steal from a forensic accountant eventually makes you assume that because I was old, alone, and grieving, I was not paying attention. I am always paying attention. I spent 33 years as a CPA in Dallas. The last 18 of those years, I ran my own firm out of a 2-room office on Preston Road that I started in 1998 with 2 filing cabinets, a used desk, and 11 loyal clients. By the time I retired in 2021, my firm had 47 clients, a staff of 3, and a rock-solid reputation built one correctly filed return at a time. Numbers do not lie. You cannot argue with the record. My wife, Eleanor. I would have said I became an accountant because I was a stubborn man who wanted a job where he could always be right. She was usually accurate. Born in Waco, Texas. In 1954, Eleanor was the kindest person I have ever known. She was a social worker for the Dallas County Department of Family Services for 26 years, bringing a fierce conviction that people were always more than their worst circumstances. She kept a stunning garden in the backyard of our house on Mockingbird Lane, tending to it from the first warm weekend in March through the last in October with a baffling patience. She kept detailed notebooks for that garden, just like she did for everything. Eleanor died of a massive heart attack in August of 2022. She was 67 years old and had no prior cardiac history. She was perfectly healthy on a Friday evening and gone by Saturday morning. I won't describe those first weeks of loss. They are mine. But what you need to know is this. By October of 2022, just 7 weeks after her death, my daughter Maggie had asked me 3 separate times about the status of my estate plan. I have 2 children. Thomas was 39, lived in Austin, where he worked as a high school history teacher, and called me twice a week. In the months after his mother died, he drove up to Dallas repeatedly without being asked, and never once asked a single question about money. He also, on 2 separate occasions, quietly warned me that he was worried about his sister, and that I should be careful. Maggie was 43 years old. She lived in the wealthy suburb of Plano with her husband, Richard Hayes, and their 2 teenage daughters, Richard worked in commercial lending and was the kind of man who calculated exactly how much warmth was required for a social situation and applied precisely that amount. In 12 years, he had never said a single spontaneous thing in my presence. Maggie was intelligent and capable, but pointed in a direction I had recognized for years and refused to name because she was my daughter. Now, Eleanor was gone, and within 7 weeks, Maggie was asking about the estate. The questions were framed cleverly. She mentioned the tax implications of my house on Mockingbird Lane. She offered Richard's help in reviewing things. I noted every one of those conversations in my work notebook, dated and summarized. Just as I had noted every significant conversation in my professional life for 33 years, by January of 2023, Maggie started pushing for my online banking login, claiming she wanted to help me manage my bills. I politely declined. I noted the conversation. In March of 2023, I came home from the grocery store to find Maggie in my study. She claimed she was looking for an old photograph of Eleanor, but when I walked in, she quickly slammed my laptop shut. I didn't say anything. I just noted it. That week, I applied the same forensic specificity to my own accounts that I used for my clients. I found 2 alarming things. First, my checking account had been accessed from an IP address in Plano, Texas, at 2:47 in the morning. On a Tuesday in February, the access lasted 4 minutes. Second, there was a hard inquiry on my credit report for a home equity line of credit on my Mockingbird Lane property. Submitted online in my name in January, my credit freeze had blocked it. But the inquiry was there. I sat at my desk for a long time. I know what a finding is. I know what it means when a pattern in the data contradicts the stated facts. The next morning, I called an attorney named Susan Caldwell. She was 58 years old and ran a no-nonsense elder law practice on Oaklawn Avenue. I walked into her office at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning with my notebook, a printed summary of the digital footprints, and my outdated will from 2019. Susan reviewed everything completely and without performing any dramatic reactions. "Mr. Pendleton," she said directly, "in your professional judgment, do you believe your daughter intends to take action against your estate?" "I believe she is in the process of doing so already," I replied. "The credit inquiry and the account access are reconnaissance. What do you want the outcome to be?" "I want my estate to go exactly where I decide it goes. I want Maggie to understand that I caught her before she could cause irreversible damage. And I want an absolute, undeniable paper trail." Over the next 3 weeks, I executed a flawless financial restructure. I established a revocable living trust, naming my son Thomas as the sole residential beneficiary. I transferred the house into the trust. I opened a new primary savings account at Lone Star Bank on Oaklawn Avenue and transferred all my primary liquid wealth there. But I purposely left the Texas Star Bank checking account open with a balance of exactly $22,460. I knew Maggie had my login and was watching that specific account. If I closed it, she would panic and change her tactics. I needed her to see exactly what she was looking for. I then called the bank's corporate compliance department and spoke to a fraud specialist named Nancy Whitman. I gave her the account number. I told her exactly what I expected was about to happen and asked her to flag the account for enhanced monitoring. Nancy said, "Mr. Pendleton, in 20 years of bank compliance work, I have received perhaps 3 calls, like this one. How did those situations resolve?" I asked. "Favorably for the people who made the calls," she replied. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in October, Maggie took the bait. After leaving the bank that morning with the forged signature slip and security photos, I drove straight to the Dallas Police Central Division on Lamar Street. Officer Miller took the report, and the case was handed to a financial crimes detective named Laura Mitchell, a precise, sharp woman in her mid-50s. When I met Detective Mitchell the following Tuesday, I brought everything. The notebook with 14 months of dated entries, The Plano IP address logs from February, the blocked credit inquiry from January, the 3-week asset restructuring timeline, and a completely cross-referenced index of every conversation I had with my daughter. Detective Mitchell stared at the stack of evidence. "Mr. Pendleton, you prepared this yourself. I was a CPA for 33 years. I said, "Preparing documentation is not something I do when I need to. It's something I do as a matter of course." She asked why I hadn't come to the police back in March. I gave her the only correct answer. Because in March, I had an anomaly. An anomaly is not a case. A case is what I have today. With the security footage, the forged signature, and the completed timeline, I needed to be certain before I acted. She looked at me steadily. "We'll open the investigation." I called my son Thomas from the police precinct parking lot. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything. In order. From the credit pull to the police report. He listened in complete silence. When I finished, he asked, "Dad, how long have you known?" "I've been building the file since March." He took a breath. "Mom would have seen this coming a year ago." "I know." I said, "She was always faster on the human things. The numbers I'm good at, the human things take me longer." I drove home and sat on my back porch. I looked at Eleanor's garden, which had begun to go to seed without her guiding hand. I walked to the potting shed, found her notebooks, and spent an hour in the October light reading her exact instructions for 3 seasons of a garden she would never see again. I finally understood what she had been growing and what each living thing needed. The police investigation took 11 weeks. Assistant District Attorney Michael Vance reviewed my documentation with considerable respect. The digital forensics were devastating. Between October 2022 and October 2023, Maggie had monitored my balances for over 8 months. When they executed a search warrant on her phone, they found a notes app where she logged my money. The final entry was made at 7:58 on the morning of the bank visit, exactly 49 minutes before she walked up to the teller. It read account balance, as of this morning, $22,460. Moving today. She had chosen a random Thursday. Assuming I had no appointments and no reason to check my balance. She didn't know I had scheduled that exact bank visit in my calendar 3 weeks prior. She didn't know about Nancy Whitman. The fraud flag. Or the hidden trust account. Her husband Richard instantly hired his own lawyer and claimed he only had general awareness of her actions, throwing his wife under the bus to save his own career. In January, Maggie was officially charged with theft of property, forgery, and criminal simulation. She didn't contact me. I didn't contact her. Thomas called me twice a week, and we talked about his students, the Dallas weather, and the garden. By April, Maggie entered a guilty plea. She was sentenced to 5 years of probation, a permanent criminal record, and full restitution. The restitution payment arrived in June. I deposited it into the protected trust account, noted the date in my notebook, and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. It was finally over. Thomas drove up from Austin the following weekend. We sat on the back porch, and he helped me identify a plant along the south fence that Eleanor had grown. He remembered she planted it because specific birds love the seeds in October. She wrote that it wants less water than you'd think. He told me, we found the exact page in her notebook later. She was precise, even in the margins of life. We only talked about Maggie once that afternoon, for about 15 minutes. Thomas asked how it had gone this far. The answer is the same for all financial fraud. I told him, the person believed their target was not paying attention. The plan became so real to her that she completely forgot what paying attention actually looks like. She should have known you better. Thomas said, she knew me 33 years ago. She just didn't update the information. Today, the garden is doing better. I follow Eleanor's notebooks religiously, learning the things I should have learned while she was here to teach them. The south fence planting put out seeds in October, exactly as she promised. And I watched the specific bird she intended arrive to take them. She built that garden not just for the present moment, but for afterward, for the person who would be watching from the kitchen window when she was gone. I built my financial documentation the exact same way. Not for the moment I would need it, but for the moment after, when having the record would dictate exactly what was possible. 33 years of professional habit, applied to the most deeply personal betrayal imaginable. The record is the record, and the record was mine. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment below and tell me which moment hit you the hardest. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you are not already here. And I will see you in the next one. True Story uploads every week. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss out.